Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here with us tonight on what will prove to be, I am quite sure, a remarkable show. One that should and will affect every single person on the planet. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining because I want to get right into the show, but I would like to tell you a little bit about my guest. His name is Christopher Kerr. He's the Chief Medical Officer and CEO for Hospice and Palliative Care Buffalo. He's in Buffalo, New York. His work is his passion, and he believes that such care should be delivered through the continuum of illness, not just at the time of death. He's overseen the integration of expansion of palliative care into hospitals and developed a huge home-based program for both adults and children. He's lectured and published on innovative program models that are designed to better align patient and family services to the complexity of the needs inherent to advanced illness. Dr. Kerr's received numerous awards throughout his time and his career that has recognized his clinical performance as well as his success as an educator and scientist. He's the author of the book, Death is But a Dream, and we're going to ask him about some television projects that he's also been involved in, including a Netflix series that is available now and an upcoming PBS series or PBS special, which I'm really excited about. Welcome to Night Vision, Dr. Kerr.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Very appreciative.
Well, as I told you, I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, you know, there's that old saying, you know, the only things you can, be sure of are death and taxes. And I believe I've probably known a few people that might have evaded some taxes, but I don't believe I've ever known anyone that has evaded death. And it's there waiting for all of us. And interestingly, and I'm not going to get too much into my personal story. Most of my listeners know that, I lost my daughter several years ago, and that's been a huge factor in my life and in shaping the rest of my life. And so I've had a particular interest in the grief process and bereavement and how confusing that it is. And I remember one of those things that I was thinking right after my daughter passed away. It was like, okay, yeah, I believe, I've been brought up to believe in, in heaven and afterlife. And, there are also people that believe that, we come back into reincarnation. And I'm thinking, but hey, all bets are off. This is my kid we're talking about. Where is she? What happened? What is she experiencing? And that was the most troubling part. And then also the part of how can I ever imagine that I'll ever be able to smile again, to have joy in my life again. And I was grasping for people to speak with who had been through the experience. And one of the things that helped me the most was just before my daughter had passed, and I wasn't expecting her to pass away, but literally a week before, I had met with a group of near-death experiencers. And there was a big round group going around and sharing their stories of their near-death experiences and what they saw, what they brought back and with them and that sort of thing. And that was something that I grabbed onto really strongly were those accounts. And so a little bit later, maybe I'll ask you about, how that correlates with death and dying experiences. But would you share with us how you started paying attention to these stories of people that were dying, or I want to say visions, but I don't know that it's really visions. It's just what they see.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that it was a natural fit for me to go in this direction, but it's the farthest thing from the truth. I am not predisposed to go in this kind of direction at all. What happened was I was a cardiology fellow here at the University of Buffalo, and I needed to moonlight. And in 1999, I started working at a hospice on the weekends. And I wasn't there very long. And the truth is, from my training, we were taught to kind of defy and defeat death, not to acknowledge it, let alone the experiencing of it from the patient's perspective. And what happened was it was really my colleagues, my non-physician colleagues, who made me acutely aware that patients were having these kind of inner experiences at the end of life. And I was probably more discomforted by it than anything. But then what I realized was there was just a number of cases that they were undeniable and clearly therapeutic for the patient and for their loved ones. So I kind of had to reinvent myself, and absent technology and acute interventional medicine, just be present. And when you do that, you just learn to appreciate that there's this other aspect of the dying experience that's that is more than what we see.
You know, I wonder too. You've probably been there at the bedside when some people have passed away, and in my life, I've had two experiences of being with people at the moment of their passing. One was quite a number of years ago, a young friend of mine who was only 35 years old. And I flew out of state to see him before he passed. And probably within the hour of my arrival, he was gone. And I really felt like he had been waiting for me. And then, of course, my mother, who died just about a year and a half ago. And in both cases, you hear a lot of people being fearful about being around a dying person or a dead person or something like that. But in both of those cases, I was struck by the privilege that I felt. Certainly sorrow, but also like I was sharing a very special experience, a very intimate and, maybe spiritual experience.
Well, I think you touched on the important thing, which is that we somehow, particularly in a Western culture, have sterilized dying as a medical phenomena, as failing parts, organs, but it's actually a closing of a life and ultimately a very human experience. And I think that's actually what you're describing. Was something larger.
Now, I love the story about your kind of relative, I guess, first experience where you were, as you said, as a physician, you're taught to, fight for life no matter what. And would you mind sharing that with our audience tonight about how there was a gentleman who you were going to order up some life-saving or hopefully life-saving measures on?
Yeah, it's actually funny you bring that up because they actually tracked down the nurse from 1999, and she's in the PBS World Special.
Oh my gosh, I love this story.
Yeah, what happened was he was dying of complications of AIDS, and I came. He was young, and he had been a runner and healthy and prior to this. And I just thought he had more time, and I was so used to doing things, even things that didn't make sense medically in the face of obvious futility. And I came into the nursing station and I announced, I think he's got more time. We're going to give him some antibiotics and some fluid. And the nurse didn't even look up, and she said, no, he's dying. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, he's been talking to his deceased mother. And my reply was, well, I don't remember that class in medical school. And he said, well, you must have missed a few. And of course, the patient did die. And it's funny because what ended up happening was, long story short, the nurses really were able to kind of predict death based on these experiences. And then, of course, when we did our first study, we've done 8 to date. When we did our first study, we did follow people daily until death with this kind of standardized questionnaire. And there is this change in frequency and the content of what people are experiencing as they near death. So there really is something that you can almost prognosticate off. So she was right.
And like you said, maybe, when you hear certain things from people, if you're paying attention to what, people are saying who are very ill, it doesn't necessarily mean if they share one of these experiences that death is imminent at the moment. But like you said, they take on a change or an escalation in tone and tenor maybe over time. And so you can kind of see how they're progressing, and then that they're getting closer. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. And we follow people sequentially, and you can see a change, and multiple levels actually. Yeah.
Yeah. With my mom, by the time I arrived at her hospital, she was out of state also. She hadn't said anything since she had had a surgery, and she seemed fine afterwards, but she just didn't make it. Her body just couldn't deal with it. So by the time I arrived, she wasn't talking anymore. But when I went over, we were all standing around her bedside. There was a whole bunch of us in the room, my sisters and my nephews. And I leaned over and said, "I love you." And she said back to me, "I love you." And only a couple of us heard it, but we were both like, our eyes got really, really big. But with my younger friend, I remember he started talking to his sister, who had died a couple years before, and her name was Brenda. And he said, "Oh, Brenda, the flowers are so beautiful." And he had the biggest smile and kind of sunshiny looking face, but he wasn't looking at any, it was like he was looking beyond us all in the room. And so I thought, well, this really does happen. What they say, people are greeted by their loved ones who've gone before. Is that the most common experience?
Yeah, it certainly is. So there's others, but predominantly as you get closer to death, and what's really important is what you're describing is very common, which is those last moments in that kind of distant stare where they're almost transfixed or seen through you. When we do our studies, these are studies that are approved from a university and an ethics panel, and we aren't looking at those final moments. We're looking the days to weeks. The patients that we're looking at are cognitively intact. They have to sign consent, witnesses, and we often film them. They sound like you and I. And when we look at these folks, there's a couple of themes that emerge, but far and away the greatest as they get closer to death is seeing people who they've loved and lost. And very specifically, excluding people who may have, conditioned their love or hurt them in some ways. Oftentimes there's one parent who was nurturing and loving and expressive, and the other one who withheld love. And you tend to see the person who loved you purely. And what's really interesting is when we measure comfort based on content, so on a 0 to 5 scale, kind of what gives you the most comfort, it's seeing the deceased. And those sort of dreams actually increase in frequency the most. So there's this built-in mechanism of increasing comforture with these kind of reunion themes with people who you've loved. And when we measure realism on a kind of 0 to 10 scale, their most common number given is 10 as being the most realistic. We use the term dreams, but only because it's the only reference we have as a nomenclature. But what our patients typically say is, no, you don't understand. I don't normally dream or remember them. And no, this was real. It feels virtual to them.
And doesn't it also sometimes happen while they're sitting there wide awake? I mean, they're not necessarily asleep, but they might see someone, or
that happens as well, and it's a very strange phenomenon. They actually report that half the time they're awake, and it's weird because it's less common that you obviously see somebody who you walk in and they're actually seeing something, although that certainly happens, particularly towards the end. I think what's happening, or maybe happening, is dying is really progressive sleep. And so sleep architecture changes. You come in and out and level of alertness, and they may be lucid dreaming, so it feels like it's lived or virtual. We really don't know. But, what we've tried to do with our search all along is not try to overextend the interpretation into the afterlife or the religious, the paranormal, but really just understand and translate what words were told by the patients themselves. And if we're to listen to them and believe them, which we should, that's what they're describing, is very real, tangible events.
I completely get that, you're doing a scientific study, so it wouldn't really do for you to start speculating, or philosophizing about, like you said, the afterlife or some religious part of it. But I don't think certainly does give glimpses, to those that might be so inclined. It kind of, I don't know if it's evidence. It's anecdotal, but I don't know if it's evidence of an afterlife, but it's certainly not evidence against it.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that it's not that, I agree. The end conclusion seems to be that there's a better story, right? Is that we ultimately are put back together with those who we've loved and lost, and that there's this connectivity between lives, whether they're deceased or living. And it seems to be irrespective of age or distance and time. So you can be 95 years old and lost your mom at 5, and it's her voice you hear and her perfume you smell. So I absolutely agree that it's life affirming. I guess our concern was that if we take a position, I guess it's this. It's it. Dying is a mystery unto itself, and we should at least have reverence for what's being described by our patients, and not have to go to another interpretation and just accept it for what it's being described as. So I'm not denying the importance of the interpretation of the afterlife, but that wasn't really our job. We wanted it accepted just at its face value. And I think as soon as you go too far along those lines, you're adding a layer of interpretation that's harder to accept for some people. And what we're trying to do is say, just look at them, see them on film, look at our study. There's a lot of patients we're talking to, and we've done this for a long time.
Right, and people can judge for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I understand how it would have kind of tainted the scientific element of the study by speculation, because that's not really what science is about, I guess. You're giving the facts, you're looking for the evidence, and you're presenting it. Right. And then it's, up to whoever to interpret it. But I noticed that, I did see some of the clips of people that you've interviewed who've shared experiences. There was one of a lady who had lost both her husband and her daughter, and that was all she had. And so she really, had been through it and didn't really feel a lot like living after she lost both of them. And that she started, after she became ill, she started having these dreams or experiences, I'll call them, of spending time with both her husband and her daughter, just as they used to, sitting around the table, eating food, laughing, talking about just everyday things, just like they always did. And she was so comforted by that, and you could see it in her face. She was just smiling, and she had absolutely no fear of death. You ask her about that, and she says, oh no, she said, I haven't feared death since I lost my husband. And I thought, bingo, that's exactly, I used to be the biggest scaredy cat when it came to death, and I couldn't even attend funerals of people that I didn't know, just to support people that I did know that were their loved ones, because I would just get too upset. And but after I lost my daughter, it took away all the fear of death. And I thought, I noted that she had said that was pretty remarkable. Do you find that when people lose someone close, it's like they kind of lose their fear of going after them?
I think there's that, which is certainly characteristic of people who have had traumatic loss, is that yes, we all have wounds from having lived, and that's one that's very different. But I think we see it across the board. So we actually did a study where we looked at dying as post-traumatic growth. So this idea that there's positive changes as a result of a seemingly negative experience. Mm-hmm. And what we found was that people who were having end-of-life experiences, which is the vast majority of people, actually show measurable changes in growth. They're adapting, they're gaining insight, they're understanding, and it really the data suggests is that dying is this kind of paradox, right? You're physically declining, but psychologically and spiritually, you're very alive, and you're changing, you're learning, you're growing. And that's kind of what she's describing. Her name was Phyllis, that she's having these very profound experiences. And two things happen. One, it kind of validates having lived and loved, and it also inversely diminishes your fear of death. And most of the patients that you see in our video aren't describing the Dylan Thomas fighting the dying of the light. They're not fighting against anything. They're fighting towards. They're fighting the people who have these experiences want to go back to what they were feeling. The other thing that's very, very interesting about her that is extraordinarily common, and that's probably very different from near-death experiences, which I actually don't know a lot about. Near-death experiences seem to be very, very, very dramatic. White light, being some great epiphany, being told to go back or do something, whatever. These folks, they're not trial running this. They're really dying. And what I am yet to hear some great epiphany, some great metaphor, some great need to analyze. What they do is little is said between the people who they're dreaming of. And they're not given profound insight. What they do is they're getting a feeling. They're intuiting something. So it's more common or not that it's everyday life, like she describes, sitting around the kitchen table with her lost daughter and her husband, and just that feeling of love and familiarity. And the best way to describe it is of being put back together again, to be made whole. And that doesn't require going to the mountaintop and lightning bolts coming from above. That it comes down to our greatest accomplishment, which is our relationships.
Absolutely.
And so that's a striking difference from near-death experiences. People come out seemingly profoundly changed and a need to write a book. These people just are coming out and saying, you know what? I was together again. It's with my family. And my God, that felt good. And, I'm not scared. And I want to go back, like, to what they were experiencing. So, and she just is kind of prototypical of that kind of experience.
Right. So they don't come back with like messages for the world or anything like that.
You want to know what? I've done this for 22 years. I have never in my entire career seen a patient say, "Hey, guess what? I've seen the arc or the great filling." I just haven't never heard it. And I've also never heard anyone say, "Doctor, what do you make of this?" The time for analysis is over. It would be cruel that they leave us with questions. They leave us feeling less alone. And that's more important than unsolving a mystery. It just is what it is.
That's just amazing. It does seem that you talked about the culture of death and how we kind of don't want to address it in Western culture. We don't want to talk about it. We try to just get over it as quickly as we can. And people get really weird when somebody dies. Like I know that in my own experience of loss, the people that I thought would be right there for me were the people that just kind of disappeared. And the people that I had no idea would even care were there in spades. What can I do for you? You want to work? I'll give you a job. You want to do this? Do you need some money? What do you need? And it was amazing. And I didn't resent the people that disappeared because I understood they just couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle me, because they'd only seen me happy, really. And I get it. It's not for the faint of heart, but it seems to me, and I thought about it at the time, but of course I was just too screwed up to help anybody else. I had to first help myself through it. But I always have thought that there's something that could be done or taught in order to make this experience less painful, not only for the dying person, and I'm talking about emotional pain, not physical pain, but also for those who are left behind. And it just seems like, and I felt like when I saw your talk, your TEDx talk on YouTube, I thought, maybe this is it. This could be it. This could be the thing that if we could look at this a little bit more, it could really help people. Now, I know you talk to like nursing organizations and other groups. You do a lot of lecturing. And have there been like nursing organizations that have said, "Hey, we want to get involved and we want to send you accounts of people that we've taken care of"? It seems to me like they must all have stories.
Yeah, talking to nurses is like preaching to a choir. I'm not telling them anything they don't know. And there's really nothing new in most of what we're saying. We've just quantified it better than other people and put some measure to it so it was accepted. But yeah, nurses get this to the bone. They just do. Doctors less so. But yeah, we hear from people from around the world, actually, all the time. I had a really interesting experience recently. There's a 3-time Emmy-winning documentary filmmaker in Australia, and she was working with the indigenous people of the Amazon and the Outback, and she was not focusing on the dying, but it came across in her cultural work that, they talk about the saved language for this, and it's always been the case. It's nothing new. We've lost our way with it. And she actually said, I read your book, and she goes, they talk, this is part of their culture, and it is. What we've done is we've lost our way with dying. And it used to be something that was an accepted part of the experience. It was shared by the immediate community. There was gathering and rituals and da-da-da-da-da. And it was for other cultures, it was the way they connected to their ancestors. So death didn't have the same sense of finality. But obviously, we're an ageist, consumer-driven, always some way to fix something kind of society. So it's made dying seem unnatural and more difficult and sterile. And I think that's but there's a change. We're seeing it, whether it's death doulas, death cafes. This generation, they don't want the doctor's death. They don't want to die in an ICU, intubated with lines on them. They want something that is more human. And so we're certainly seeing a shift. And I just think this kind of work is part of the equation, where it's showing another dimensionality to dying that is that goes beyond seeing it as medical futility.
You talked about people seem to experience some kind of, growth, spiritual growth, or maybe more personal awareness as they progress toward death. And, I've often thought about how, as a young person, generally you're pretty selfish. And you don't really think about people dying because you haven't really lost anyone. I mean, that's not everyone, of course, but for the most part, when you're young, you haven't lost a lot of people. But as you get older, you start to become more aware of what's more important. Like when you're younger, it's like, what can I get? What can I buy? What can I, where can I go? What career do I want to have? And then later on, as you live a lot more life, you start realizing that all that stuff is not really the important stuff at all, but it's the people that you love and the relationships that you have while you're here. And it almost seems like what you're talking about is a continuation of that. It's like, in some ways, we're always marching toward that final journey, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's actually really clever. That's actually an excellent analogy.
Oh, thank you.
Which is that basically, as we age, we naturally let go of the trivial and embrace what actually matters, and that continuum accelerates. So some of this isn't all that dramatic if you think about it. So dying, if you're 3 months from death, you're not concerned whether you're going to get your license renewed. Right. You just don't give a damn. And the closer you get, a couple things happen. It obviously changes your vantage point, so it changes your perceptions and your perspectives, but it draws you inward towards reflection, towards the things that matter. So you're not going to think, where did I leave my car keys? You're going to more likely to think of that dog you loved as a child. And that's what we see. And it just kind of makes a lot of sense.
It does. And, speaking of pets that you loved as a child, I saw on one of your videos where you had interviewed some very young dying patients, and
children.
Yes, children, and inevitably, because they haven't lost a lot of really close loved ones, inevitably they will see like beloved pets, and it seems like whoever or whatever gives you the most comfort, then that's what you get almost.
Yeah,
like you said, the most loving parent.
Yeah. So what tends to happen is, and we've written these children up, and some of them are videotaped and they're on the shows. They often haven't known someone who's died. So who comes for them? And what seems to happen, at least in several of the cases we've uncovered, is that they have all known pets who have died. And a couple things are important. The pets return in health. And on the film, the children use the same language, which is that basically it means that we're not alone and that we're loved. And that just seems to be a recurring theme. So the same message of love and not being solitary seems to come out again and again and again.
I know that, I'm trying to remember where the symbolism originates, but I know that it's very old, and that there's some symbolism behind dogs that in some cultures they believe that dogs are guides into the afterlife. And I know that there's a big cemetery, I believe it's at Harvard or somewhere nearby there, where they're on the post, the pillars, there are these dogs statues, the guides to the afterlife. So it kind of makes a lot of sense, that the animals are coming back to help. It seems like that they might have had some hint of that, centuries ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's certainly very, very common. Animals are very common. We hear about them all the time, as is travel. So this kind of metaphor that there's a transition, or you're going or preparing to go. Those are the themes that pop up again and again.
Wow. Now, there's been so many of us, my family included, who have experienced deaths over the past year from COVID-19. And as you know, most of those patients are not able to have their loved ones next to them at their deathbeds. So it ends up being, as sometimes it is anyway, a nurse or someone, a medical person that is there standing in for the family. Have you heard anything, or do you have any opinions about if that makes any difference? Have you heard people reporting the same types of things? Of course, a lot of people that are in the hospital and dying of COVID are no longer verbal. But I just feel like, so many people have suffered so much this past year because they weren't able to be there with their loved one, and they think, they went alone, they died by themselves. But what I'm seeing and what your work is showing is that maybe they weren't alone.
No, it's a great question, and I wrote in some editorials about this, and I spoke about it at something called End Well, which I think is online. If you type my name in End Well, a couple of points is that we are not reduced to our final moments. Our life and our existence and our meaning is far greater than anything that can be reduced by days in a unit, and that the human capacity to feel is also greater, and the data is just so overwhelming that people leave us. They may be physically isolated from us, but they're not alone from us. And that's what our dying patients tell us. And you don't have to be present. You just have to be felt somewhere in their heart. So I don't think I'm not convinced that matters, and it kind of makes sense. You don't live, 8 decades on the planet and all of a sudden denied that. There's some justice to having lived, I think. There's a better story again.
And have you had any? Well, I'm sure. When you first started this, there were probably a lot of accounts that surprised you because, you started seeing it, noticing that it was happening again and again, and we're collecting these accounts. But I saw one that was a little bit different than some of the other ones that you showed in some of your videos. And there was one gentleman, I don't remember his name, but he was kind of a scamp. And I think he was only about 45, although, bless his heart, he looked a lot older because he was so ill. But he had spent a lot of his adult life incarcerated. He had, committed some crimes and things. And he was having some sort of troubling experiences, but it sort of turned out in a positive. Could you share that? You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, Dwayne.
Dwayne.
And that's interesting because he just kind of dissolved on film. We had no idea what he was experiencing going into that. But basically what we found was about 17% of people had dreams that were discomforting. And, one of the takeaways was people die how they live. So the fact you're dying doesn't deny the realities of the distressing points of life. And Dwayne is a case in point. The mistake we made was assuming that the negative or the distressing didn't have meaning, when in fact actually the most probably transformational end-of-life experiences were the distressing ones. So in Dwayne's case, he had been on crack since 16. He had spent more of his life out in prison than out. And towards the end of his life, he was talking to us, and he was always joking. He just had that kind of life that he couldn't look backwards with regret. He just kind of lived forward and always joking. And he was joking about having, a bunch of sexual dreams and da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he dissolves. And I had neck cancer, so he had open wounds on his neck. And he starts crying and saying, I'm having dreams that the people I hurt are stabbing me where my wounds are. But what happened was he woke and he had this kind of powerful need to see one of his daughter and to tell her that he was sorry and that he loved her. And so she comes and he just embraced her, and she's on film too, and says it was the longest hug she'd ever had. And he couldn't stop saying how sorry he was, but that he loved her so much. Of course, she forgave him. But that release, that reckoning allowed him to sleep comfortably. And it's very hard to die if you can't sleep comfortably, not just from physical pain, but from psychological pain. And he passed. And the same was true of, like a gentleman, for example, who had been traumatized by 67 years of PTSD from World War II, and no therapy or drugs could really help him. And then towards the end, he dreams of the soldiers he left on the beaches of Normandy, and they come to him now. And again, he was able to sleep. A mother whose child was incarcerated from addiction and related crimes, and her identity as a parent was vulnerable. And in her end-of-life experiences, her parents come to her and tell her she's a good mother. So whatever wounds we seem to have in some way get addressed, and the reality is sometimes they hurt, but that's part of it.
Well, the man who was the soldier that you were talking about, he did get a message that was pretty important for him, and I think, at least in the presentation, it seemed like that was the real thing that really let him sort of relax and be all right with everything, was that he was told that the soldiers were going to come and get him.
Yeah, it's a long story, but he was on a boat. There was soldiers who were trapped, and he was on a distant ship that was not didn't have the landing craft, but they sent him and some other young men to go to shore to rescue people, not to drop them to the shoreline, but to bring them from the beach to the ship. And there was so many bodies and people he could carry, so he was riddled with guilt over who was left and who he couldn't be saved.
Oh.
They came to him in the end and said, we're going to come for you now. And that just gave him relief.
Wow. So in other words, they were letting him know that, it was all right.
Yes. Yes.
They had no resentment to him at all.
Yes.
They were going to take care of him.
I think he had to be reunited.
Yeah.
They were a part of him in a way that he that had never left him. And he was 17 at the time.
Oh, goodness.
So, yeah.
How long after he was given that message that they were going to come in
6 days.
6 days. Wow.
Yeah, it was really interesting is when we were writing the book, we brought his family in, and his sons and daughter, and they said something very interesting. He had a whole other life. He was born in a rural area of Texas, but he'd actually ironically met a German woman and lived in Buffalo. And he almost had he never acknowledged the war. He never wore the hat, never went to a parade, never went to the Legion or the hall, anything like that. Never talked about it. And what happened was towards the end, the last few weeks of his life, he was there, more there than here, and very expressive. And it all came to surface. And I'll never forget the one said, he goes, in some ways, I learned more about my dad in the last 2 or 3 weeks of his life than I ever did in any time before.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
Because he just hadn't been able to share it before.
No.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I imagine, it's, my dad, fought in the war, and, a lot of our parents have been in the service and gone through experiences that we probably don't really know much about, because they didn't come back and, brag about, what they did for the country or anything like that. They just came back. They went to work and got on with it for the most part, but I know that, like, for instance, with my father, the older he got, it seemed like the more important to him that aspect of his life was. And he did manage to track down a couple of his comrades and actually went out and had a visit with one of them, or two of them, I think. And I just thought, wow, why would he even care after all these years? Why would he, and it's like, but, of course, now I realize that was a huge, huge, huge thing. And we just, as kids, didn't think about it or imagine what our dads could have gone through.
Well, our perspective is all wrong, right? We're looking at them through a child's lens, and
yeah.
We don't know them in their younger self. And I think there's something about aging that makes us go full circle. And it's very, very common. And I think, I think older people are able to show tenderness differently and reflection different. It's very interesting.
It really, really is. You kind of lose, I think as you age, you kind of lose a little bit of that ego thing.
Yeah, you just inhibited, right? I mean,
you don't worry about, what somebody's going to think about you, or how you look, or how you sound.
No, I think it's kind of the grace of aging.
It is. That's, there are a few gifts, but that's one of them.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Now I just say what I want, and I just blame it on, I'm just old.
Right.
But now, I know you experienced the death of your own father which had a big effect on you. Do you mind sharing any about that and how that came into play in your research? Did that sort of propel you, or did you have any experiences with your dad?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't like to think that it prepared me, but I think it's pretty undeniable that I end up kind of coming back to something that happened to me when I was 12, which was the last time I saw my father. He was thought that we were going up north. We're Canadian, and going fishing, which we did every year. And so, I knew intuitively as a kid that he was in wherever he was, it was a good place, that we were together and he was happy, and it was special where the times that he was reflecting on. I actually didn't talk about it much or at all. And then what happened was I started working at a hospice, and I'm kind of forced to see what I had kind of tried to forget, which was that I had seen this. And, I actually think it pushed me away from looking at people's dying experience, not because it was negative, but it just, it was life altering. To lose a parent as a child.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So I didn't speak up, but then actually what happened was I was preparing to give the TEDx talk, and it just felt so intellectually dishonest that I'm talking about.
You had to come clean.
Yeah, so I said to a good friend of mine, I said, hey, we go for lunch. I said, I got to tell you a story. I said, this is just, what do you think? Because it just felt so weird to be talking about it objectively as a physician, when the truth of the matter is it was one of the more powerful moments of my life. And that's my last memory of my parent. And so it's not, I don't think about these things naturally, as I said, but maybe it's not a coincidence that I end up in this line. So.
Yeah, well, I would say that was, preparation, whether you wanted it or not, of course.
Yeah.
But I can see how that might have been. It's interesting. So when your father was near death, you're saying that he was talking about wonderful things that you used to do together.
No, I'm sorry. He was looking at me, reaching for me, and fiddling with my shirt, trying to get me ready for something. He says, we've got to go and catch our plane. We're going to go up north.
Wow.
So in his mind and in his heart, he wasn't dying in a hospital bed. He was with me, experiencing what was the most special time for us, was when we got to be together alone up north. So that's how he left me in life, was not alone again, but together.
Wow. So when at that age, how did that affect you at the moment? Did it scare you? Did it make you think, oh, he's hallucinating? Or did it?
No, what scared me was the priest who came in, grabbed me, and took me out of the room.
Oh. Yeah, priests are kind of scary.
Well, it's just this idea that we try to protect children from realities, right? And the odd thing was, I wasn't frightened by it. I was comforted by it.
Right. Oh, good.
And of course, since then, we've published 2 studies on 750 bereaved people who showed that, what's good for the patient is also good for their loved ones. So,
oh, that's wonderful news. Wonderful news. So many people need that right now. I'm hoping a lot of people are listening and get the message, get your book, see your programs. We're going to take a break in just a moment and take care of some business. And then we're going to come back and talk some more with Dr. Christopher Kerr and about hope, death and hope. Not life and death, death and hope. All right, people, hang in there and we will be right back.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. And purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Permanent industrial glue impossible to remove? Not anymore, because Handyman Formula by D-Bond is a patented chemical adhesive remover. It's used in the building and home maintenance industry, but now it's available for your home use, for your DIY projects. Unglue stickers, silicone rubber, labels, price tags, flex tape, weather stripping, carpet glue, wood glue, liquid nails, even 3M 5200. And it dissolves graffiti. Yeah, graffiti. Handyman Formula by D-Bond works, and it's safe to use on most surfaces. No need to call a professional. Don't get out the pliers and blowtorch. Just apply a little Handyman Formula by D-Bond and wait 90 seconds, then quickly and easily pull the items apart. Get unstuck. Visit DBondHandymanFormula.com. That's DBondHandymanFormula.com or call 561-575-4200. Handyman Formula by D-Bond.
Please listen. Now is not the time to fear. When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath. No garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves! Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at GetTheTea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com and build your shields. That's GetTheTea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett. Tonight with me, we've been listening to Dr. Christopher Kerr, who's going to be back with us in just a moment. But before we get back to our conversation about death and hope, that we're going to talk to my good old buddy, Alan Maxon, who is actually a Night Vision alumnus. He was it's been a while now, been a number of years back, but he used to do a little newscast during the night vision program when we were on another platform. And he would give all the strange and wild news from around the world each week. And I called him Night Vision Newsman Alan Maxon. But now, and he's also a colleague of mine from television production. And he's got a project now that's a film project that I mentioned last week, if any of you guys were listening, called Alien Planet, which is a sci-fi film. Hey, Alan.
Hi, Renee. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's funny hearing you talk about the Nightman updates or the news Nightman updates, because that was so fun.
Night Vision Newsman, Alan Maxon.
It was so great. I remember I entertained myself while finding the updates. It was so great digging through all the different articles and websites, and I even subscribed to a few magazines of that had personal people reporting in encounters and stuff.
You were all
UFOs
into it.
And Sasquatch, and it was just so fun.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And we actually worked together on a project for the Sci-Fi Channel, and now you're doing a sci-fi film. So why don't you tell us about it?
Absolutely. So this is my third film as a writer-director, and it's called Alien Planet. I currently have an Indiegogo crowdfunding source going, and it has 1 week left. And I'm trying to do a push to get as much money raised as I can to make this movie look as fantastic as possible. And the synopsis of the movie is, it's very similar to classic science fiction from the 80s, 60s, 50s. It's two alien species that have prejudice and hatred towards each other, but they both are running out of water. And so in order to survive, they have to learn to get along and find the secret to rejuvenating their planet with sustainable drinking water. And throughout this adventure, they encounter other dangerous monsters and creatures, and then most importantly, each other, because it is a long history of just pure hatred for each other. And so mixed in this sci-fi adventure is a mirrored image of our society.
Exactly.
Yes. And it's sadly, it's not, a lot of people, when I tell this to, they say, oh, it's really relevant. And yes, it is, but also it's been relevant since the dawn of man. And it's sad that that's the case, but it truly is an issue that's never gone away. And I think it's wonderful to talk about these issues in science fiction, because in my movie particularly, there are no humans. They're all aliens with prosthetic, practical makeup. So you're on this adventure, but because they don't look like us, it hits you harder in your heart because you have nothing to associate with them except for who they are on the inside. And I think that makes it have a deeper impact for this moral, social undertone that's in the movie.
Wow, that sounds great. So how do they, if somebody wants to look at information on it and maybe contribute, how do they do it? Just Absolutely. Go to Indiegogo.com?
That's it. Yeah, Indiegogo.com and search Alien Planet. And it'll pop right up. And if for some reason you are having trouble, which you shouldn't, but you can find Alien Planet on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It's Alien Planet Film, all one word.
Right. Oh, that's so great. Well, I'm all for supporting independent filmmakers because I've been one myself.
Yes.
And I know how hard it is to do that. And the worst part is the money.
It really is. But once you get past that hurdle, it's creativity and making something beautiful for people to watch.
It's so amazingly different than producing for a television network because you don't have the business people and the executives putting in creative input. This is, it's going back to letting the creative person create. Yes. Letting the producer produce. And that's what's so beautiful about it. And even though it was one of the most painful experiences of my life doing that film that I did, it took us 5 years. It was a 5-year documentary investigation. And we were just completely exhausted by the end of it. It's still the most fulfilling project, and it's the favorite thing that I have and the thing that I'm most proud of that I've ever produced.
When it means a lot to you.
Absolutely.
You never let go of that.
And I mean, for the viewers, you may not realize it, but it's so much of a pure story, because you're actually getting the story that was meant, to be told by the artist, and not, change this because this guy would be a better villain, or, whatever. So Indiegogo.com, and it is Alien Planet. So I encourage everyone to just have a look at it and see if it hits you and help them out.
And what I ask of everybody is, I know times are really tough, and we've been in a pandemic for a year now. So one, if you can contribute on an indie level like this, every penny counts. So no matter what you can help with, we will make it stretch. And I offer on there almost every level you get a producer perk. And I think that is something that is very valid, because I cannot make this movie without everyone who helps. So everyone who contributes truly is a producer. And you'll get it on screen and on IMDb. And almost every perk also gets a copy of the movie. And that's something that's important to me, because like you said, it's so hard to do this. Everyone who helps means so much.
It really does.
And if you can't help, share the trailer, because we made a spec trailer, and we put in a lot of care and time to make this spec trailer look amazing. And if you cannot monetarily help, share it and just say, hey, whoever likes aliens and adventure, watch this. It's a minute and 20 seconds, and give us a share. Maybe someone will help us out.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Alan, I mean, I'm going to say this out loud, but I asked you to share it on my Facebook page, but I didn't see it.
Oh,
put it on there.
It.
It's not up there.
Again.
Try it again. Anyway, Indiegogo.com, Alien Planet, Alan Maxson, thank you so much.
Hope
to
Renee.
See you soon. Got to go for coffee
absolutely.
when we can get out and about.
And maybe I'll do another news segment.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And we're back with Dr. Kerr and talking about death and actually the positive aspects of it, which, are so needed, not just now, but always. Dr. Kerr, you were talking about, other cultures, and I think it was the indigenous cultures of Australia, and how some of the things that, they just sort of depend on or have been known to them for all this time are things that we're just now starting to look at. And in history, in ancient cultures, do you find that to be more true in certain areas of the world rather than in Western countries?
Yeah, I think it was central to cultures throughout history, to indigenous people, to people of China, Australia, South America. There's an enormous amount of writings anthropologically about how important this was to their cultural identity, to their understanding of ancestry, to their linkage to people before them. It was a way to honor life and the connection to it, whether they were deceased or not.
Recently I worked on a production that it was a 4-day long thing, which enveloped Halloween, and also, of course, the Day of the Dead. And here in Southern California, we have a huge Latinx population. So we've all sort of come to know a little bit more about that celebration, the Day of the Dead. And so we decided that as part of our production that we would do a salute, to those that have gone before. And so we had some of our compadres build an altar as they built, for their families for our production. And many of us brought, pictures of our loved ones who passed. and placed on the altar. And it was this beautiful, colorful thing. And, they have a lot of celebration around it. They pass out the little sugar skulls, and it's all very, very lively and colorful. And I remember when they set the altar up, and there were a couple of us, one of them was actually the show host, and I were standing there, and she had put a picture, I believe, of her mother, and I had put a picture of my daughter on the altar. And I remember we both just started crying. And these guys, that had built the altar and were used to this celebration, I felt like, we made them really uncomfortable, because they were, saying, no, this is happy, this is a celebration. And I was thinking, wow, we just showed our complete, opposite understanding about death, because they were able to get it from their culture, and we didn't have that background. So, but I remember feeling kind of foolish, thinking, oh, we've totally misinterpreted this whole situation.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But what about in places like the Middle East and in ancient Egypt? I know you hear a lot of talk about the far world in ancient Egypt, and they have the stories for accompanying people into the afterlife, and they dress them and they give them certain articles and things. I would imagine that they're doing that because they just believe that their loved one is on some sort of continuation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching theme, right, is that we aren't defined by our bodily presence, but there's some sort of continuation and a reverence for the kind of spiritual identity of that person. And it continues, and yeah, they prepared absolutely for the afterlife. But it's also it's kind of this reassuring notion that they're accessible to us as well, like, because they're never truly gone.
Right. Just a couple weeks ago, we lost a beautiful young family member in a terrible car crash. And of course, I was upset about losing her, but my thoughts immediately went to her parents and, how they're just beginning this terrible journey of grief, and how I wished, that there was something I could do. It was important to me to get a message to them immediately that I'm here to tell them that they will feel joy again, they will laugh again, and they'll smile again. And at some point, when they think about Kristen, they'll be happy, and they'll be able to, they'll never stop missing her, but they will incorporate it. But the other thing I was thinking is if I have occasion to, I also let them know that I'm available 24/7 if they need to talk with anyone. Because I remember the first thing that I wanted after my daughter died was to speak with my aunt who had lost her son, because I wanted her to tell me, how can I live now? How do you even process this? And the other thing, it was very strange. It felt like there was an emptiness, or like a big hole in me. And I didn't know if that was because, at one point, I had carried my daughter in my body, but it was a very, very physical thing. But by the same token, by contrast, I also felt like she was more with me than she had ever been. It was like it's like I took her back into me. Very, very, very strange experience. Have you?
I think that's actually a really interesting perspective. I think I mean you're really brought to the more rudimentary kind of dynamic of your relationship, right? Which is that there's a bond there that is unbreakable. And back to kind of your earlier point about distractions, you were no longer distracted. It just came back to almost this primitive, visceral thing.
Yes.
Of who she was to you and you to her, and it really was a reminder that you're inseparable. That makes sense to me.
Yeah,
it feels right.
Yeah. I remember my big worry was that she was just going to, either just be no more, or that she was just going to join some big, cosmic soup and not be herself anymore. And I didn't feel that, I was worried that that's what it would feel like, but I didn't feel that. I still feel that, she's around, and she's been gone, over 15 years now. It's really bad. I forgot to mention earlier that if anyone has a question that they'd like to pose to Dr. Kerr, please join the chat room on Discord. Just look for KGRA on Discord, and we'll be happy to entertain some questions a little bit later, or as they come along, if they're relevant to what we're talking about at the time. So I'd love to help you out. I know that's kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people and very painful, but what we're offering, I'm hoping, is some comfort and hope. So if we can help you through a personal situation, or if you just have a general question, please let us know, because we'd love to answer those. But now you said you've done like 6 studies already?
8. Yep.
8. Is this a continuing thing? Are you going to keep going with your studies? And how many people have you now interviewed?
About 1,500. And kind of what happened was we originally did the first study because I was educating medical students and residents, and they wanted evidence. So we spoke their language and did the studies. What happened was interesting is that the medical world really didn't care a whole lot, but it seeped out to the popular press, and it headed the front science section of the weekend edition of the New York Times, the Washington Post, Huffington a couple of times, the Atlantic, Psychology Today, Scientific American, and then it went around the world. Wow. And so what happened was it got propelled kind of forward. People wanted to share what they had experienced, and there was finally this kind of framework for people to feel validated. So it was that kind of momentum that we just kept doing more studies. It wasn't intentional. It just kind of was in response to what we received.
Wow. And did you find, are you sort of, solitary in this endeavor, or have you found that there were other doctors and medical personnel around the world that were doing similar studies?
Yeah, no, there had been a lot published, but the problem was it was kind of anecdotal or case-based, or it was surveys of doctors, nurses, social workers. People hadn't rigorously gone to patients, interviewed them, designed, standardized questions, that kind of thing. That we did. So it's really important to note that, what we did really wasn't a discovery. It just put a better frame around the picture.
Right. Yeah, well, it was, paying attention to something that has been kind of ignored, except by maybe some of those nurses you were talking about. Yeah. I know that probably more nurses are on hand when people are actually passing than anyone else.
Well, nurses are just are closer to the actual bedside.
That's right.
Experience. They interpret the family differently. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
They're on site. Yeah, I remember, when my mom passed, that's who was there. It was, late at night and just the nurses, and they handled it beautifully as ever. I have a couple of sisters that are registered nurses, so I'm a little partial to nurses. I tell you, they're the best. But so, I know that your intent, and certainly, the results of your studies don't really address a philosophy or religion or anything like that we talked about. But just between you and me, what do you think? Do you, do you have a personal philosophy that you would feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I certainly didn't start off with a particular religious or spiritual bent at all. And actually, the paranormal kind of makes me uncomfortable and all that sort of thing. I think where I end up is believing, as I said, that there's this better version, that there's not finality, and that the best parts of living kind of are secure and continue. And so the people who we've loved really aren't gone from us because they seem to reoccur, their presence felt, their love understood. So I find that enormously comforting that there isn't, it's not about nothingness. And it's more that it's interesting. It's more that the fact, not that the dying necessarily prove that there's life ever after. It's the fact that the people who have died before them are still here.
Right.
And that's what's really interesting. So, and again, it's what I think impresses me the most is seeing like an old man in his 9th decade, tangibly feeling a parent that they may have lost in childhood. So the intervening 8+ decades, a mother who lost a baby and she's 88 and now she's holding the baby. So the loss is redefined as not the end of the story. So it suggests whether it's real or felt, who knows, but that that we should have enormous reverence for those experiences.
Absolutely. And, it's something that is probably the worst thing in the world that, if you ask, and I certainly know that, they always say that, the worst thing in the world for a parent is losing a child, and so death of a loved one is probably worse than just about anything. I mean, you could lose your money, you could lose your job, but a loved one is irreplaceable. So if we can figure out a way to assure people that they haven't really lost them, that's immense. That's could be of immense help.
I think that's kind of where we end up, right? Is that the people who are dying. Problem is from where you and I are sitting today, we don't really know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
We do have to respect what people who are actually, whose life is closing, we do have to listen to their words. And they're telling us something very special, right? That there's something that's reconnecting them.
Yeah. You were talking about how, you see the person that, that you had like that pure love connection with. And then we see Dwayne, who's still on the living side, who is experiencing these sort of a bit of trauma, recalling or being shown these bad things that he had done to people and how they were, sort of attacking him for it and everything. But does it ever happen that, or have you witnessed this, that where a person is dying and they had a loved one who maybe wasn't so great in the earthly life, but then they came and said, "I'm sorry, I love you, I'm here to bring you with me"? Does that ever happen, or is it always just that feel-good person?
It tends to be the feel-good person, but there certainly are powerful stories of forgiveness. But it tends to be not the person who harmed them, but the person that they harmed.
So they might have a loved one on the other side who offers them forgiveness.
Yes.
Oh, well, that
Yes.
would be very powerful.
Yeah, it's and it's this idea that you need to be healed or the wound addressed. Yeah.
So it's really all about the dying person and not about the person on the other side. So
Yes.
they're not looking for anything from you. They're giving.
Yes.
Wow. That's really powerful as well. And, there've been, I've seen stories of people who have had visitations from someone that they didn't recognize, but they did recognize that it was someone really, really positive and loving. And then later, they realized it was the grandparent they never met, or someone like that. I know, when I started watching your videos with the kids, the ones that you showed, talked about pets and animals and how they got that same loving, caring response, that comfort from the animals. But do they ever see people, whether they know them or not?
Yeah, there's actually, it's interesting because kind of to cover both of those, there's a child in one of our films, for example, whose fear of life ending was, who was she without her mother? And who she ended up dreaming about was her mother's closest friend who had passed, who she didn't know. And what she did is she dreamt, and she's going up the stairs and past her mother's room, and her mother's deceased friend is playing with the drapes, is fixing the drapes in her mom's room. And the most interesting thing was, and this is all, again, on film, she's 13. And she didn't want to tell her mother because she didn't want to upset her mother. So she kept this experience to herself. But she knew exactly what it meant, just like she knew what the return of the dog meant, that she was okay. And she also liked the idea that her mother loved this person and that she was a strong person, and then so was she. So she definitely made all the right associations from having seen her. But yeah, that's an example.
But yet she didn't know the woman in life.
Oh, not at all.
Wow. That's interesting. So basically the lady was there saying, "I got this."
Yeah, I mean, she had grown up in her memory, though, right? This was her mother's closest friend.
Right. And in her experience, did she recognize who it was, even though she didn't know her?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, she's in the PBS film, I believe, describing it.
Oh, wow. That will be. Now, do you know when that's going to air?
April 15th and 16th, I believe. Yep. On the
Tax
World
Day.
Channel PBS.
Death and Taxes.
Yeah.
Wow. PBS World.
Yeah, the
I
World
can't wait to see
Channel.
that.
Yep.
Now, the other, the series that you're on, I think you said episode 5. What's the name of that series, and how do people find that?
The Netflix docuseries called Surviving Death.
And you are
like 6 globally in January.
Oh, wow. That is great. I'm going to have to check that out. I'm so sorry I didn't realize. I thought that was still in production, and so I did not see that. So I am definitely going to take that in.
PBS World show is the same name as the book, which is Death is But a Dream.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. That's good. Yeah, and the book is available on Amazon because I checked it out and made sure, and got the I got the Kindle copy.
Oh,
but
great.
I think I may get the hard copy because I like my books. You know, it's like I figure when we lose everything, when we lose the electricity or whatever, if we, you know, if I move to Texas and don't have electricity or water, I'll still have my books. So I definitely want to grab a hard copy of that as well. But now, when you talk with and I was glad to see that or hear that you've included the bereaved in your studies now as well, and those are included in the films, right? In the the series and in the documentary.
They're some of the best stories, I actually believe.
And what kind of things do people share with you? Do they say that it helped them cope
enormously? Yeah. And, you know, we actually have done studies where there's measures of grief and grief processing, how people adapt, how people remember, all those sort of things. And the longer story short is that people who witness these have a much better grief process, a much healthier one, less illness and pathology, more acceptance. Yeah, because it turns out, not surprisingly, how we witness somebody leave us affects how we remember and accept and process. And it's strongly influenced by these experiences. And I honestly, I think on the film, they're equally as powerful, if not more powerful than the patients.
Wow. And what kind of stories do they tell you? I mean, are they witnesses to these things or?
Yes. Yeah, very much. So, you know, one widower on there is, well, actually, one of the more interesting ones involves a patient with dementia and her daughter's on film. And what happened was, as she's nearing the end of her life, the mother's trying to leave the nursing home because when she goes to bed at night, she's reliving the best day of her life, which was her wedding day. And she thinks she's got to get to the chapel. Wow. Even as she's in her final days, she's overwhelmed with joy and love. And the daughter would go there anxiously to see her mother and hear of what she's experiencing. And it turned out to be something beautiful.
Wow. Well, you know, as I said, I had what I believe is the privilege, you know, to be next to someone 2 times, 2 different people who've passed over. And I remember feeling it wasn't really, that wasn't the sad part. It was a very, you know, kind of sacred moment. I can't really explain it. I don't really have the words for what I was feeling, but I did feel very much in awe of it and very happy that I had been there even though I didn't really do anything, I felt like I was privileged to be there in that moment. And do you, when you've been with someone who's passed or just passed, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
is it the same, or is it different for doctors? Or
No, not for me. It's profound. It's sacred. It's defies description, and I think it is a privilege to be part of that. I agree. Remembrance is important. Respecting life and its closing is important. And I think there's an obligation to be there and to be present and all those things. So yeah, no, I agree with you.
And it is just a very, very different kind of experience, but it also feels like, to me, like, okay, you see them, take their final breath, the nurse comes in and she checks and she confirms, but for a little while there, it feels like they're still right there.
Right.
It doesn't stay that way, but you feel like they're in the room with you.
I think that's very accurate. Yeah, and then you come, over time, then it feels differently. But that's right. You're right. Hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right.
It feels like they kind of hang around, and kind of check out what's going on or something. And then, I had similar feelings, after coming home after my daughter died. This sounds crazy, and so I kind of like never really shared it, because I thought, well, I'm just overcome with grief and I'm, hallucinating or whatever. And it wasn't anything that I really saw, but I would feel like she was like always like in the upper right-hand corner of the room, like by the ceiling. And like, I would be drawn to that point for some reason. And I wondered if that was just like, just a grief hallucination on my part, or if there could be something really to that. If there is something indeed of us that does go on, then I would think that would be possible.
Yeah. And people describe that. The presence is almost tangible to them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been one of those people who have looked up and seen my daughter, at the foot of my bed, smiling and dressed in white and glowing and saying, "I love you, Mom," or anything like that, which would be wonderful. But I have felt those times, and I hope I don't cry. Sometimes when I'm hugging her children, I feel like I am her. I feel like she is in me and I'm hugging them for her, but it's really her.
Well, in a sense, it's probably true, right? Again, goes back to what we said earlier, in that at some level you are inseparable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm sure you must feel an obligation to almost represent her at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She was so much better mom than I was. And so I tried to emulate her. I had my kids when I was so young and selfish, and I was, single for most of the time, after my divorce and everything. So I was dating and, cared so much about, what I was wearing, what was going on at work, this, that, and the other. I was always there for my kids as a support and, always took care of them. But I feel like I'm so much better a parent the second time around here. And I guess I have to credit my daughter for that, because I think I'm trying to be like her. So, but also I think it's just being older, being more patient, not being so caught up in myself,
Yep.
as I was back in those days. So, and honestly, what a gift it was to have them, because I think, they helped me keep my sanity. I remember in that first video, I think it was, from your TEDx talk, and the lady had lost her husband, and she said she really just didn't want to live anymore, but she had her daughter. So that's what kept her going. And then later she lost her daughter. But I thought, I totally get that. And I thought, when I lost my daughter, I just thought, it's not even worth it, But then, of course, I had to be here for those kids, And then I thought, oh, gosh, now I've got to take, I thought I would think, oh, I've got to take on these kids and, do this all again. But I never, ever felt that way. And believe me, they've been a much bigger help to me than I have been to them, I'm quite sure. It's been such a wonderful blessing, to have them. And, I see her, of course, in them, but also just, that idea of being needed. And that's what the lady in your film was talking about. She said, nobody needs me anymore. I don't do anything for anybody. If you fell down, I couldn't help you up. What am I good for? And that sort of thing. So,
it's ultimately what defines us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I find, and I wonder if you've found this in your experience with bereaved people, that although it's a horrible experience to lose someone, there are gifts that come with it. And I believe, that I received gifts, and I believe I'm actually a better person than I was.
That's actually the second book we're working on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I believe I'm more understanding, more empathetic to people.
Yeah, and I know what we hear from caregivers, it's this notion that was the best, hardest thing they did. And they're certainly become more enlightened from the experience. They're somehow elevated by it, by loss. There's books about the importance of pain, that's transformational.
Yes.
Yeah, all those things are true.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I would have never expected something like that to come from something so awful. But I'm grateful for every little small gift. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have chosen those gifts over my daughter, but I certainly appreciate them as they come. And, it's important to, I think, let people know that, yes, they've lost a lot, but there will be some gains. There will be some gains made.
You end up ultimately more substantive.
Yeah.
You've been forced on some kind of spiritual trajectory. You don't come out the same.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like those astronauts, you see all these old retired astronauts and, they've all got long ponytails now and they're talking philosophy and, they become much more spiritual and everything. It's sort of like that. It's sort of like they have this experience that sort of changes who they are.
I think the analogy of a journey is accurate. Both are journeys.
That's true.
And
unknown frontiers.
Yeah, when you're taken somewhere that you're different from. Well.
Yeah, I know that you said you don't know a lot, and this hasn't been your study for of near-death experiences, only death experiences. But I think some similarities in that I did do some studying of that. In fact, it was just before my daughter died. was actually working with a medical doctor who was doing studies in that area, and we were doing a documentary. And then right in the middle of things, I lost my daughter, and I dropped the ball on it completely. One interesting thing that came from that was I did get a call from that doctor's wife sometime later, and she says, "Oh, this is Dr. So-and-so's wife." And she said, "I know that you were working with my husband on a documentary about near-death experiences, and I wonder if we dropped the ball or, what happened." And I says, "Oh, my goodness, no. I said, I'm sorry, it was my fault." I said, "I lost my daughter, Jolie, on May 22nd, and I just, have been out of it a bit." I said, "As you can imagine, I find the subject even more interesting now." And she said, "That's so strange," because they had a little girl, I think that was about 3 years old or something like that at the time. And she said last night, she just said, Jolie. And she says, we kept asking her, "Who's Jolie? We don't know anybody named Jolie." And interestingly, that little girl's birthday was May 22nd.
Oh, my gosh.
I thought, oh, my goodness, there's something there. I don't know what it is. Yeah. But even more kind of strange and weird about that was several years later, and you might have heard about this because it was on national news, that same doctor was actually arrested for abusing his daughter, that same girl. And what he had been doing was basically like waterboarding her.
Oh, God.
And he was trying to induce near-death experiences in his child. And that's that same girl that said, Jolie. And I thought later, gosh, I wonder if my daughter was trying to help her, give me a message about her or something like that. Isn't that strange?
Sickening, actually.
Yeah, really wild. So what's coming up now, Dr. Kerr, other than the PBS special, which I can't wait for? That's going to be on April the 15th. And are you just carrying on with the studies? You got another book coming out, you said?
Yeah, we're still kind of riding the wave from the first book. It's now published it's been out a year. It's published now in 10 languages, coming out in Chinese, I think, this week.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of, it's nice because this was never my ambition, but it's certainly nice to see more conversations. So I'm happy to participate in this, but I'm very much interested in this caregiving and bereavement story, that I think we always view it in terms of strain, and we talk about caregiver strain, but there's also these very positive aspects to it.
Yeah, I can imagine how, first of all, just the good feeling of caring for someone, being able to help them, but also, bearing witness to some of these experiences.
And I think that what we're finding is that people can't believe the courage or strength they had to, provide care.
Right.
Stop their lives, the courage it takes sometimes to do the hard things, and that's what we're trying to capture.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was meaning when, I took on my grandkids. It was like, I wouldn't have imagined that, not only I did it, but I've enjoyed it and I've received so much from it.
You're probably good at it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I've got good kids. I don't know whether it's because of me or in spite of me, but Oh, goodness. But anyhow, I really do appreciate you coming on today and sharing some of these stories. Now, are you doing any lecturing these days? And I noticed that one conference that you had, but it was just nurses in Santa Barbara. But do you have conferences where you speak to the public?
Oh, very commonly. Yep.
And
a lot of them, I was on a book tour when COVID hit, actually. But I probably, give a lecture every couple of weeks, probably about 4 or 5 podcasts or interviews a week.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's very hard to keep up with. And it's kind of gone around the world, so very busy.
Wow. Yeah. Now, on your website, do you have a schedule of events or anything like that?
Yeah, they usually post things, and the site to go to is Dr. spelled Dr, not spelled out, Dr. Christopher with a C, Kerr, Kerr.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been calling you Carr the whole time.
That's okay.
Like the actress Deborah Carr. I thought I was being so smart. I apologize for that.
No, drchristopherkerr.com, and there's usually a list there. There's links to the book, the films, and most importantly is there's videos of patients and families.
Yes.
It's one thing for me to blab on, but to hear it from them is more important. So I encourage your listeners, if they can, to take a peek at that site.
That's Dr. In no period in there. I'm Dr. Nope. Christopher Kerr, all one word, .com. Yep. Oh, that's really interesting and exciting. So I'm going to be looking forward to watching your schedule and seeing if you're coming anywhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Where are you again?
Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles.
That's right.
Yeah. And the other thing I had always thought about, having, coped, with grief in my own life is, always wanted to help other people try to get through that in some way. And I was thinking, there's got to be like some place people can go, like either travel, to some travel destination or something and get together and work through grief or learn about death in a different way. Are you planning any retreats or anything like that, or do you have anything like that coming on the horizon?
No, I really wouldn't feel qualified. That the therapeutic end of grief, even peer group supports, is really a skill set unto itself. There's certainly lots of them. And, the evidence is that they're very effective. So other parents getting together with other parents. We offer a lot of those services at our center, for example. And
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Very meaningful.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to take the time out because, obviously you are a very, very busy person, and to talk to our audience about this.
Great questions and much appreciated.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I'm just speaking from the heart, especially on this show, because it is, there's that saying of, be kind because everyone is fighting a battle. And yeah. I think that when you have gone through these types of experiences, that really comes home to roost. And, if we can take anything from any of this, it's just be kind to everyone and also pay attention.
Yep.
Pay attention or you might miss something.
Yep.
So have a look on Amazon.com for Dr. Kerr's book. And it's Death is But a Dream. And also be sure and check out the Netflix episode on available now on Netflix and upcoming April 15th, the PBS special. And we've got all kinds of good things to look for in the future. And I hope that this episode of Night Vision has helped someone out there. If it's helped one person, then I am happy. And I want to thank you, Dr. Kerr, for coming on and sharing with us. Very, very wonderful. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. See you next week.